I think I've grown in. I don't think I was bad at it at first, but the more you're around players, because they have different personalities, so you can't cookie cutter your approach. To me, relationships are time over time. It's like you spend time over time with someone, and that's how you build trust. A position doesn't give you trust. Just because I'm a head coach, that doesn't mean they're going to trust me. And so if you think that positions give you trust or give you respect, then you're going to be a poor leader.
The gym didn't gasp at first. It froze. One sharp whistle, one cold stare, and then the words no one expected. Sit. The USA team coach didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain. He didn't look back. He just benched Caitlin Clark like she was any other name. Not the player fans paid to see, not the engine of the offense, not the face lighting up every phone. Caitlin stopped mid-step. For half a second, the world felt wrong. Teammates glanced around in disbelief. Assistants stiffened. Fans laughed nervously, waiting for a punchline that never came. Cameras zoomed as Caitlin walked to the bench, jaw tight, eyes burning. Every movement broadcast like evidence. The game unraveled instantly. Spacing collapsed. Shots clanged. Passes arrived late. The noise shifted from excitement to confusion, then anger. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs into outrage. Why her? Why now? What message was he sending to everyone watching live? Caitlin sat there, fists clenched, pulse racing, the competitor in her screaming while the bench swallowed her whole. She didn't look at the coach. She didn't look at the scoreboard. She stared ahead, knowing millions were already watching, dissecting every breath. Then the coach stood up again. What he did next wasn't coaching. It was a statement so calculated that players stopped moving. Fans rose to their feet, and the gym understood this wasn't about rotation anymore. This was about control. And Caitlin Clark was about to be pushed to her breaking point tonight, on camera, worldwide. This moment didn't begin with a whistle. It began years ago, long before the USA jersey, long before packed arenas and sold-out merchandise racks. Caitlin Clark learned early what it meant to carry expectations heavier than most players ever would. Every gym she walked into, every shot she took, came with eyes watching not just her game, but her behavior. She wasn't just supposed to win. She was supposed to be perfect doing it. From the start, she was labeled differently. Coaches praised her talent, then immediately followed it with reminders to stay humble, stay quiet, stay manageable. The message was subtle but consistent. Greatness was welcome, dominance was tolerated, but power needed supervision. Caitlin absorbed it all, turning pressure into fuel, silence into focus. She let her shooting speak, her numbers roar, her composure become armor. By the time she reached the national stage, she wasn't just a scorer, she was a symbol. Networks built narratives around her. Sponsors built campaigns. The league built hopes. With that came an unspoken contract. Carry us, but don't challenge us. Lead, but don't disrupt. Shine, but don't burn too hot. Inside Team USA environments, that pressure multiplied. Veterans had their roles. Coaches had their systems. Politics hummed quietly beneath every drill. Caitlin entered not as a rookie needing guidance, but as a star needing containment. She felt it immediately, the extra scrutiny, the shorter leash, the expectations to adapt faster, listen more, accept less explanation. She noticed how mistakes landed differently. A missed defensive rotation from someone else earned instruction. From her, it earned a look, a pause, a note taken. Praise came carefully measured, as if too much would shift the balance of the room. Caitlin adjusted the only way she knew how, working harder, staying quieter, letting the game speak louder than she ever could. But silence has a cost. She watched as other players asserted themselves, argued calls, demanded touches, questioned rotations. When she did the same, even subtly, the temperature changed. Not openly hostile, just colder. Conversations ended quicker. Feedback became shorter. Authority drew clearer lines. Caitlin wasn't unaware of what she represented. She knew fans came for her. She knew ratings followed her. She knew kids wore her name on their backs. But she also knew that inside the gym, power didn't come from applause. It came from control. And control was guarded fiercely. Every Team USA practice reinforced the lesson. The standards were high, brutal, even, but unevenly enforced. Caitlin learned when to push and when to pull back. She learned which looks meant approval and which meant warning. She learned that being indispensable didn't mean being untouchable. Emotionally, it carved her in quiet ways. She carried frustration without letting it spill. She swallowed moments where she wanted to ask why. She told herself it was temporary. That performance would win out. That respect would follow. But respect isn't automatic in rooms where hierarchy matters more than results. As the season progressed, the whispers grew. Too much attention. Too much influence. Too fast. Caitlin felt eyes tracking her not just as a teammate, but as a variable that needed managing. The joy she once played with hardened into focus. Focus sharpened into restraint. And still she delivered. That's what made the benching cut so deep. It wasn't just a tactical move. It felt personal. Like every unspoken tension had finally found its outlet. Like the leash she hadn't realized was there had suddenly gone tight. Sitting on that bench, Caitlin wasn't just reacting to one decision. She was carrying years of accumulated pressure. Every moment she chose restraint over reaction. Every time she proved herself again just to remain accepted. Her chest burned with questions she'd never been allowed to ask. Did all of it matter? The numbers? The wins? The loyalty? Or was she only valued as long as she stayed within lines someone else drew? As the noise in the gym swelled, Caitlin felt something shift inside her. Not anger. Not fear. Something sharper. Clarity. The realization that this wasn't about one coach or one night. It was about whether she would continue absorbing pressure quietly, or finally force the truth into the open. Because deep down, she knew one thing with certainty. Benching her was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of a confrontation the system had avoided for far too long. And whatever came next would expose exactly who held the power and who was ready to challenge it. The moment the coach benched Caitlin Clark, the game stopped being a game. From the sideline, Caitlin could feel it. The way the air changed, the way conversations died mid-sentence, the way assistants suddenly avoided eye contact. This wasn't a teaching moment. It was a demonstration. And everyone in the gym knew it. On the court, the USA offense unraveled in real time. The ball stalled. Shooters hesitated, unsure who was supposed to take control. The spacing collapsed without Caitlin's gravity pulling defenders apart. What had looked fluid minutes earlier now felt forced, awkward, almost panicked. The scoreboard didn't lie, and neither did the frustration creeping into teammates' body language. The coach stood with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. He didn't glance toward Caitlin once. Not when the shot clock expired. Not when a turnover led to an easy bucket the other way. Not when a veteran slammed her palm against her thigh in frustration. This silence wasn't indifference. It was intentional. Caitlin sat upright, back straight, hands folded, refusing to slump. Cameras caught every blink, every tightening of her jaw. Analysts whispered into headsets. Social media erupted in real time. Why is she benched? Is this disciplinary? Is there something we don't know? The speculation spread faster than the fast breaks. She was no longer running. Then the coach called another timeout. Players jogged to the bench, sweat dripping, eyes darting. Caitlin stood instinctively, ready to step back in, only to freeze again when the coach walked right past her. He gathered the team in a tight circle and spoke in a low, clipped voice, one hand gesturing toward the court, the other tucked firmly behind his back. Caitlin couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. She saw players nodding, some reluctantly. She saw one teammate glance at her, eyes wide, then look away. She saw the assistant coach scribbling furiously, not on the play sheet, but on a separate page. And then came the first shocking twist. The coach turned, finally looked directly at Caitlin, and said it, clear enough for nearby microphones to catch. This team doesn't run through one player. The words hit like a slap. Gasps rippled through the stands. Commentators fell silent mid-sentence. Caitlin felt heat surge up her neck, not from embarrassment, but from disbelief. This wasn't just a coaching philosophy. It was a public rebuke. A line drawn in front of cameras, teammates, and millions watching at home. The coach continued, louder now, no longer pretending this was private. No one is bigger than the system. That was the moment the gym truly shocked itself. Because Caitlin Clark had never claimed to be bigger than anything. She had done exactly what was asked, scored, facilitated, drawn coverage, won games. And now, she was being framed as a problem that needed correcting. Teammates exchanged looks. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others stiffened, realizing they were witnessing something that went far beyond rotations. This was about hierarchy, about authority asserting itself against influence it could no longer comfortably manage. Caitlin sat back down slowly. Inside her chest, something cracked, not loudly, not explosively, but decisively. The years of swallowing frustration, of staying composed, of letting respect come later, all collided with that one sentence. No one is bigger than the system. But what if the system was threatened by anyone who changed it? The game resumed, and the tension thickened. Every possession without Caitlin became louder. Missed shots drew groans. Defensive lapses drew shouts. Fans began chanting her name, first scattered, then unified. Caitlin! Caitlin! The sound rolled through the gym like a challenge. The coach didn't flinch. He kept her seated. Minutes passed. The lead shrank. The opposing team smelled blood. And still, Caitlin watched, her pulse pounding, her mind racing. This wasn't discipline, it was a test. How long would she sit quietly? How long before she reacted? How long before frustration became visible enough to justify the narrative being built around her? Then came the second layer of the twist. As the fourth quarter approached, the coach leaned toward an assistant and spoke quietly. But the cameras caught the reaction. The assistant's eyes widened. He looked at Caitlin, then back at the coach, then nodded. Caitlin felt it before she heard it. The substitution horn sounded, but her number wasn't called. Instead, another guard checked in, a player who rarely ran the offense, suddenly tasked with closing the game. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't temporary. This was deliberate exclusion. The crowd erupted, boos mixing with chants. Analysts scrambled. Former players on social media weighed in instantly, calling it ego management and power politics. Others defended the coach, parroting the line about systems and structure. The league itself began to sweat. Caitlin's phone buzzed on the bench. A message from her agent. This is escalating. Be careful. She didn't look at it again. The game slipped away. A loss that felt avoidable, preventable, unnecessary. As the final buzzer sounded, players stood frozen for a beat too long. Some walked straight to the locker room. Others hesitated, unsure where to look. The coach shook hands, expression unchanged. Caitlin rose last. As she walked off the court, the camera caught her face. Not angry, not defeated, but focused in a way that made even seasoned commentators uneasy. This wasn't someone humiliated. This was someone who had just realized the rules of the game had changed. Because what the coach didn't realize, what no one in that gym realized yet, was that by making this moment public, by turning authority into spectacle, he had triggered something irreversible. The benching was no longer the story. The challenge was. And Caitlin Clark was no longer deciding whether to fit into the system. She was deciding whether the system deserved her silence. As the locker room doors closed behind her, whispers spread through staff, players, and media alike. This wasn't over. Not even close. And whatever Caitlin chose to do next would shake far more than one gym. The locker room didn't explode. It simmered. That was worse. The door closed behind Caitlin Clark with a heavy thud, sealing in the tension like pressure under steel. No music. No jokes. No post-game chatter. Just the low hiss of showers turning on and the sound of tape being ripped off skin. Players avoided mirrors. Avoided each other. Avoided the truth sitting in the middle of the room. Caitlin sat at her locker, unmoving, jersey still on, sweat cooling against her shoulders. She hadn't spoken since leaving the court. She didn't need to. Everyone felt the aftershock of what had just happened. This wasn't a bad coaching call. This wasn't a matchup decision. This was a message sent in front of the world. And the world had received it. Phones buzzed everywhere. Assistants tried to keep their screens low, but headlines were already flashing. Clips looping. The coach's words. No one is bigger than the system, were being dissected frame by frame. Analysts argued. Former players erupted. Fans split into camps, louder by the second. The gym might have emptied, but the noise outside was deafening. Then the coach walked in. The room stiffened instantly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't apologize. He paced slowly, deliberately, like someone confident the room would bend back into shape. He talked about discipline, about culture, about sacrifice. He talked about how Team USA wasn't a showcase, it was a machine. He never said Caitlin's name. That omission was the second punch. Caitlin finally looked up. Her voice, when she spoke, cut through the room like glass. Then why did it feel personal? The coach stopped pacing. For a split second, the power balance wavered. Players held their breath. Assistants froze mid-motion. This wasn't supposed to happen. Questions weren't part of the script. Especially not from her. The coach answered calmly, but the edge was unmistakable. He said stars don't get special treatment. He said accountability matters more than popularity. He said systems fail when individuals forget their place. That's when it escalated. A veteran spoke up. Quietly at first, then louder. She said the offense collapsed without Caitlin. Another player nodded. Another followed. The room shifted. This wasn't rebellion, but it was alignment. Caitlin wasn't alone anymore, and everyone felt the danger of that realization. The coach shut it down quickly. He ended the meeting, told everyone to get rest. The authority was back in his hands, but it felt shakier than before, because the second major twist had already begun to surface. Minutes later, as players filtered out, Caitlin's agent called. No small talk. No pleasantries. This wasn't just coaching, he said. This was premeditated. He explained what he'd uncovered while the game was still going on. Internal discussions. Prior meetings. Concerns about Caitlin's influence. About fan chants overriding authority. About media narratives shifting power away from the bench and toward the floor. They hadn't benched her because of the game. They benched her to reassert control. And it went deeper. The agent revealed that earlier in the week, staff had circulated internal notes about managing star exposure and preventing single-player dependency optics. Caitlin's name appeared more than once. Not as a problem, but as a risk. A controllable risk. Caitlin felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't about discipline or culture. This was about fear. Fear that she had become too central, too powerful, too visible. And now came the real twist. Another message arrived, this time from a Team USA insider she trusted. One sentence. No context. They're planning to double down. The explanation followed quickly. The coaching staff intended to justify the benching publicly, to frame it as a lesson, to leak narratives about coachability and system fit. Slowly, carefully, enough to protect authority without looking retaliatory. Caitlin realized the trap. If she stayed silent, the story would be written for her. If she reacted emotionally, it would confirm their framing. Either way, the system would win, unless she changed the game entirely. The pressure mounted overnight. Shows debated whether she was being checked. Social media clipped her expression on the bench, slowing it down, reading emotions into pixels. Former coaches weighed in, some praising the move, others calling it reckless. The league office took notice. This wasn't staying internal. And still, Caitlin said nothing. That silence became unbearable for everyone else. By morning, sponsors were asking questions. PR teams scrambled. Team USA officials requested alignment conversations. The word discipline kept surfacing. So did leadership. But beneath it all was one unspoken fear. Caitlin Clark refusing to play along was more dangerous than any headline. She met with her inner circle quietly. No dramatics. No declarations. Just clarity. They mapped out options. Say nothing and let the storm pass, at the cost of control. Speak publicly and risk escalation, at the cost of access. Or force transparency, at the cost of comfort for everyone involved. Then the third layer of the twist hit. Caitlin was informed she would not be starting the next game. Not because of performance. Not because of rest. Continuity. That was the word they used. It was confirmation. This wasn't overcorrection. This was strategy. The system wasn't just reacting anymore. It was entrenching. Caitlin sat alone later that night, replaying everything. The whistle, the bench, the words, the looks. She felt anger, yes. But more than that, she felt resolve hardening into something dangerous. Because she finally understood the truth. They didn't bench her to teach her a lesson. They benched her to remind her who was supposed to have the final say. And now, standing at the edge of a moment that could redefine her career and the structure around it, Caitlin faced the choice they never expected her to seriously consider. She could stay quiet and let the system reassert itself. Or she could speak and force everyone to admit what this really was. By sunrise, the league would expect compliance. By nightfall, they might get confrontation. And as Caitlin picked up her phone, thumb hovering over the screen, one thing was certain. The next move wouldn't come from the bench. It would come from her. The fallout didn't creep in. It detonated. By the time the sun cleared the skyline, the narrative had already escaped the building and mutated into something unrecognizable. Clips of Caitlin Clark on the bench flooded every platform, slowed down, zoomed in, annotated with captions that screamed betrayal, control, and disrespect. The pause between her standing and sitting became a symbol. The tight jaw. The stare. Fans didn't just react, they chose sides. Talk shows turned into battlegrounds. Former players accused the coaching staff of ego. Analysts tried to sound neutral and failed. One called it necessary discipline. Another called it career mismanagement on a global stage. Hashtags split the internet clean down the middle. Hashtag Free Caitlin surged. Hashtag Team First trended right behind it. Every comment section burned. Inside Team USA's bubble, the silence grew heavier than the noise outside. Teammates felt it first. Group chats stalled. Laughter disappeared. Practice lines were quieter, sharper, brittle with unspoken resentment. Some players avoided Caitlin out of fear of being seen as aligned. Others gravitated closer, sitting near her, stretching beside her, letting cameras catch the proximity. Every movement became political. Caitlin herself became a mirror everyone projected onto. She tried to keep her routine intact: film, treatment, shooting, but the emotional pressure seeped in anyway. Every dribble echoed with questions she couldn't answer out loud. Was she still trusted? Was she still welcome? Or was she now a variable the system needed to contain? Then came the statements. The coach addressed the media first. Calm, controlled, carefully rehearsed. He repeated the same phrases: culture, accountability, standards. He refused to mention Caitlin by name again. That omission roared louder than any accusation. Reporters pressed. He deflected. The room left unconvinced. Minutes later, a league official released a vague comment about supporting coaching autonomy while valuing star impact. No names. No clarity. Just enough ambiguity to fuel 10 more hours of outrage. Sponsors watched closely. Some doubled down, posting Caitlin highlights with captions about resilience and leadership. Others stayed quiet, calculating. Brand managers called agents. Agents called the league. The business side of the game tightened its grip around the moment. Caitlin's family felt it from afar. Messages poured in. Some supportive, some cruel. Old narratives resurfaced about her confidence, her competitiveness, her refusal to shrink. The praise and the poison arrived in equal measure. And still, Caitlin said nothing. That silence began to fracture people around her. A veteran teammate finally broke during a radio hit, choosing words carefully but landing them like punches. She spoke about trust, about rhythm, about how certain players don't just score, they stabilize. Her meaning was unmistakable. The internet exploded again. Then the players' union weighed in. Not officially. Not yet. But sources leaked that internal discussions were happening. About precedent. About stars being publicly benched to assert authority. About power dynamics that extended beyond one game. The word concerning surfaced. So did dangerous. The coaches' camp pushed back through anonymous quotes, hinting at attitude issues and long-term culture concerns. That was the line they crossed. Because now it felt personal. Caitlin read every word. Not obsessively, but deliberately. She needed to understand the shape of the storm. And the storm was forming a demand. People didn't want balance anymore. They wanted a response. Her silence had become the loudest thing in the room. At practice, the tension finally snapped. A drill broke down. Voices rose. Someone slammed a ball. Another player walked away shaking her head. The assistants exchanged looks they couldn't hide. This wasn't sustainable. Caitlin gathered her things and left early, cameras catching her exit. That clip alone did millions of views in an hour. Commentators called it a protest. Others called it exhaustion. No one knew. That uncertainty fed the frenzy. Late that night, Caitlin met with league representatives. Closed doors. No phones. Heavy air. They spoke about optics. About timing. About calming the waters. They suggested patience. Suggested alignment. Suggested she let the process work. She listened. Then she asked one question. What happens if I don't? No one answered immediately. That hesitation told her everything. Outside, fans waited. Media waited. Teammates waited. The league waited. Everyone wanted Caitlin Clark to either fall back into line or light the match. And as she walked out into the dark, the pressure finally crystallized into something sharp and undeniable. This wasn't about a benching anymore. This was about who really holds power when the whole world is watching. And Caitlin was running out of space to stay silent. The decision didn't come with fireworks. It came with a quiet click. Caitlin Clark closed the door behind her, leaned against the wall, and let the noise outside dissolve into a dull hum. For the first time since the whistle, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was clarifying. She opened her phone and scrolled, Not through headlines, not through outrage, but through one message thread she'd avoided all day. A single name at the top. The coach. She didn't type right away. She replayed everything instead. The benching, the non-answers, the anonymous leaks, the way culture had become a weapon. She remembered how quickly power tried to put her back in a box the moment she grew too big to ignore. And then she typed one sentence. "We need to talk on the record." The response came faster than she expected. "Tomorrow. Early." That was the moment the twist took shape. Because Caitlin wasn't going in alone. Unbeknownst to the staff, the league, and most of her teammates, Caitlin had already taken a parallel meeting earlier that night. A quiet, off-site conversation with people who didn't wear whistles or warm-ups. People who spoke in clauses and consequences. People who understood leverage. They told her the truth no one else would say out loud. If she pushed now, the league would fracture. If she stayed quiet, the precedent would harden. If she chose the middle, she'd lose control of the narrative forever. But there was a fourth option. Forced transparency. Not a statement. Not a tweet. Not a carefully edited sit-down. A live conversation. Caitlin slept for 3 hours. By morning, word spread that a clarification meeting had been scheduled before practice. Players whispered. Assistants paced. Phones were confiscated at the door, but it didn't matter. The tension had already leaked into everything. The coach arrived first, confident but guarded. League representatives followed. Then Caitlin walked in. She didn't sit. She spoke calmly. Too calmly. She said she respected structure. She said she believed in accountability. She said she understood systems. Then she paused, long enough for the room to lean in, and said the line that shifted the air. But accountability can't be selective. She laid it out piece by piece. The internal notes. The exposure concerns. The framing attempts. She didn't accuse. She presented. Dates. Language. Patterns. She asked why continuity only seemed to apply in one direction. Why culture needed a public sacrifice to be proven. The coach pushed back until he couldn't, because the final twist was already in motion. As the discussion intensified, a league official interrupted with breaking news. Someone had leaked the meeting's existence to the media. Not the content, the timing. Cameras were already gathering outside. Reporters were posting updates in real time. The conversation wasn't private anymore. Caitlin met the coach's eyes. "This is why," she said quietly. The league suggested postponement. Suggested alignment. Suggested damage control. Caitlin declined. She made a request instead. She asked for a joint appearance. No scripts. No spin. One conversation. Live. Questions allowed. Accountability shared. The room erupted. This wasn't procedure. This wasn't precedent. This was chaos disguised as courage. The coach hesitated. The league balked. Advisors whispered warnings about risk and reputation. Then Caitlin delivered the sentence that changed everything. "If we're building trust, we can't hide from it." Outside, the cameras kept multiplying. Inside, the decision clock started ticking. The league asked for time. Caitlin gave them 1 hour. When she walked out of the room, teammates watched her pass with expressions that ranged from fear to awe. Some nodded. Some looked away. Everyone understood the same thing. This was bigger than minutes or matchups now. Social media exploded again when a cryptic post hit Caitlin's account. No more silence. For PM. No explanation. No hashtags. Just a time. The coaches' camp scrambled. League officials made calls. Sponsors panicked. Fans speculated wildly. Was she demanding a trade? A role change? An apology? A revolt? At 3:58, the livestream link went live. At 3:59, viewership shattered records. At 4 o'clock, the screen flickered and froze. Technical issues. Or something else. The chat flooded with panic. Refreshes skyrocketed. Commentators filled airtime with guesses. Inside the control room, technicians shouted. Phones rang. Someone pulled a cable. Someone else tried to reconnect. Then the feed snapped back. Caitlin was on screen. But she wasn't alone. Seated beside her, unexpected, unmistakable, was someone no one had anticipated stepping into this fire. The coach. And just as Caitlin inhaled to speak, the screen cut to black. The timer reset, and the entire WNBA held its breath, knowing whatever came next would redraw the lines forever. Fans, analysts, and players alike are watching this moment unfold in real time, and it's clear. This isn't just another story. This is a movement. Caitlin Clark has turned the spotlight from the scoreboard to the power structures that shape every decision, every opportunity, every narrative in women's basketball. And now, it's not just about one player, it's about the game itself. You can sit on the sidelines, scrolling past headlines, letting the drama pass you by. Or you can step into the conversation. Share your voice. Demand accountability. Ask questions. Support the athletes who refuse to be silenced. Every comment, every tweet, every discussion thread adds pressure to the system, reminding the league that fans aren't just spectators. They are stakeholders in integrity, fairness, and respect. Caitlin's choice to confront authority head-on is a wake-up call. It's a message that silence in the face of manipulation is no longer acceptable. And while the coaches, executives, and sponsors may try to control the narrative, you have the power to amplify the truth. Engage with her story. Debate it. Analyze it. Make your opinions seen, heard, and impossible to ignore. The next moments in Team USA, the WNBA, and the broader sports world will define the future of athletes everywhere. Will power structures continue unchecked, or will courage, transparency, and accountability become the new standard? Every action counts. Every reaction is part of the record. This is your chance to influence the conversation, to be more than a bystander. So don't wait. Don't scroll past. Don't assume someone else will speak up. Join the discussion, share the story, and hold the system accountable. The world is watching Caitlin Clark. And now the question is, what will you do as the drama unfolds? The next move isn't just hers. It's everyone's who refuses to let power go unchecked. Be part of it. Make it viral. Make it impossible to ignore. The story is far from over, and your voice could be the catalyst that shapes the next chapter.